Today is Friday, October 20th, 2017, and I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy. This regularly scheduled meeting is taking place in room 1A of the David Crockett Tower at 500 James Robertson Parkway in Nashville, Tennessee. The meeting date, time, and location have been properly noticed, and copies of the agenda were posted to the Board of Accountancy website on October 13th, 2017. Wendy, let me ask you to do a roll call vote or attendance. Okay.
Janet Booker Davis.
Here.
Pamela Church.
Here.
Gabe Robert. Trey Watkins.
Here.
Casey Stewart.
Here.
Larry Elmore.
Here.
Kevin Monroe.
Here.
Judy Weatherby.
Here.
Andy Bonner.
Here.
Stephen Eldridge. Are we connected?
Is Stephen?
Stephen is supposed to be calling in, but he is not at this point.
Sent me a message. So
But you have a quorum. We can move forward.
Okay, we'll move forward, and I guess we can just note when Stephen joins the meeting, note the time that he does that. In the way of announcements, the first thing, Andy Bonner, we want to welcome you as a new board member, and we won't go through all of the introduction process again. We did that yesterday, and I think everybody was here, but we're certainly glad you're on the board and know you'll make a big contribution, and just glad to have you with us. So, and anybody that wants to know more about Andy, I think his full bio is included in the materials that were provided to you on the iPad, so you can look at his complete bio if you would like to. Also, I'd like to note that board members Trey Watkins and Gabe Moon have been reappointed for another 3-year term, and congratulations to you, Trey. Of course, Gay's not here, but I know I'm glad she's reappointed. I'd like to remind everybody to, when you speak, please speak into the microphone so everybody can hear you and it'll be recorded. So we will have to have roll call votes today because Stephen Eldridge is attending by phone. So when we vote on anything, we'll have to do it by roll call. Is there anything else anybody would like to make in the way of an announcement? That's all that I have or know about. You have been previously furnished an agenda for the meeting. I would ask if there are any changes, additions, deletions that anybody would like to make to that agenda. If not, we will consider it complete and move forward.
Mr. Chairman, can I just confirm that Stephen's on the phone?
Yes.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
Okay, the minutes, I believe it was July the 14th meeting, they are on your iPad. Give me a second to... That meeting was July the 14th, 2017, and I believe we do have one small correction that I know about to make to those minutes. Karen, do you want to comment or point that out for everybody?
Yes, sir. Ms. Weatherby brought to my attention that in the NASBA committee reports for her ethics committee, I had noted that the committee is involved with accounting students across the nation, and when actually they're involved with all students, regardless of their field of study. So I made that correction to the minutes.
I believe the paper copy that I signed, that has been corrected, and so...
Yes, sir, it has.
I would ask, are there any other corrections to the minutes that I believe you've previously been furnished these and had a chance to read them, so are there any other changes or corrections? Okay, I will entertain a motion that we approve the minutes as corrected. Second. Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll need to have a roll call vote. Wendy or Karen, do you want to do that?
Janet Bonner.
I'll abstain.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Roberts,
Aye.
Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Okay, the minutes have been approved. Um, The next item on the agenda is the director's report. Again, that is on your iPad, and it's, I think, a fairly lengthy report and several things in there. I'm going to ask Wendy to comment as she feels necessary on that report.
Chairman Stewart. I start off the report talking just about some NASBA activities. I'd like to recognize Chairman Stewart. He has been nominated to serve as a director at large, or I'm sorry, a regional director on the NASBA Board of Directors, to serve a one-year term to be the Southeast Regional Director. This will be official at the annual meeting on October 31st, but he has already started some orientation and some advanced learning about what he'll be doing. So it's nice to see that participation. I have been asked to serve on NASBA's Strategic Planning Task Force. This is not a committee, a task force, and I believe it's a one-year commitment to review the current strategic plan for NASBA and see if any changes should be made as a result of what's going on in the profession at the current time. Janet has also been asked to serve and has agreed to serve on NASBA's Reorganization Impact Task Force. I believe their first call is this afternoon, and we may hear a little bit more about that later, but if not, at least the next meeting to get a sense of what they'll be doing in that group. Judy and Larry will continue to serve on the committees they've previously served on. Judy was on the Ethics Committee, and Larry has been on NASBA's Audit Committee, so that we'll see that going forward, and those individuals will give reports later on in this meeting.
Just interject some
Sure.
comments here. First off, congratulations to you, Wendy. I tell you, my brief interaction with the, I guess, executive team at NASBA through the orientation process, I know they have a high regard for you, and I think it's a compliment to us that you've been asked to serve on that committee. And the other thing, I told Wendy this, one thing I regret, this is my 8th year on the board, and I only attended my first meeting last year in Austin, Texas, and the one regret I have is I didn't get involved earlier. I wish I had gone to one of the NASBA meetings during my first term on the board, and I would just encourage anybody that hasn't been to try to make room for that, because I think you'll get a whole new perspective of who NASBA is and what they're doing and how they're really trying to help this board do its job. And I'm just glad to see that we've got all the people involved now that we do. Janet, I know this is your first committee assignment, and I think that we'll just all learn something through serving, on a NASBA committee or the board. For its benefit, I would like to note that I have been asked to serve as chairman of the National Licensing Database Committee. So, and I'm
That's
trying.
irony right there.
Oh, man. It's going to be an uphill battle for me, but I'm going to try, Trey. So, but anyway, I do think it's good that we're getting the involvement that we are, and would encourage those that haven't been to try to make time to go to one of the future meetings. So, sorry.
If I'll add just a little something to that, Andy, as a new board member, each June at the regional meetings, they have an orientation for new board members. So they have an Eastern Regional and a Western Regional meeting. And so if that works out with your schedule, it's a great opportunity to go to that meeting and get some insight as a first-time board member. So I will, of course, give you those dates when they come out. And several folks have attended that from this board and have enjoyed it. Just quickly, NASBA's annual meeting is coming up in a week. Casey will be attending, Janet will be attending, Judy and myself will be attending that meeting, and that is in New York City and is their annual meeting. The Executive Director and Legal Conference is typically in March, and at that meeting, I usually attend along with our legal staff and our investigator. So it's focused on those particular individuals. Exam fee change. This happens every so often, and I've just noted what that new fee is going to be in the report here. This is, I think the previous fee was around $193 total, so you'll see that increase to $208 listed there. Mutual recognition agreement with the Irish has been renewed. The first renewal using a new, more transparent format was signed by representatives of the Chartered Accountants of Ireland, NASBA, and the AICPA on August 10th. So for those of you unfamiliar with the mutual recognition agreement, there are, I don't know exactly how many countries, 6 to 8 countries that we have mutual recognition agreements with. So individuals that are licensed in those countries do not have to take the exam necessarily in the States, so they don't have to go through the complete process of becoming licensed. They do come here and take what we call the IQEX exam, which tests their knowledge of certain things in the U.S. But it's a streamlined way for a professional in one of those 6 to 8 countries to be able to become licensed as a CPA in the U.S. So that's what that is. And then CPAs can likewise go to those countries and have a little bit easier process becoming licensed there if they'd like. Okay, the UAA use of titles exposure draft, those written comments were due in June. This is just kind of an update from the last meeting. The board voted to draft a response to that exposure draft to include points similar to those expressed at the NASBA board, by the Nevada board, so sorry. So we did, Chairman Stewart and I did draft a letter, and that was submitted in August, and that is attached to these documents. I think you've seen that before. To summarize, this is based on what I have seen. There may be some additional comments that were sent in. I just haven't seen them. But from what I had seen, there were 21 boards and 1 state society, that was Utah, that were against adding proposed language to the UAA regarding use of titles. And there were 2 boards in favor of the proposal, that was Connecticut and Louisiana. So that's just a little summary of what I've seen so far. Otherwise, I haven't seen the outcome of those comments that were from September 30. Licensing status 65 inactive. So we had a discussion at the last meeting regarding an inconsistency in our law and rules related to inactive licensees over the age of 65. This board determined that it wished to follow the rule which exempted inactive licensees that were over the age of 65 from the renewal fee. We were unable internally to seek a legislative change there for the 2018 legislative session. There was a hard and fast deadline and we were too late. So it wasn't that it was deemed not appropriate, it was just that the deadline was gone. So I have shared the specifics of the change with TSCPA. If they choose to introduce legislation, hopefully they would include this. I do not know the status of that yet. If it's unable to happen in 2018, of course, we can submit it internally for 2019 change legislatively. Evolution of peer review administration. So there was a final plan for the evolution of peer review administration released on August 31st by the AICPA. This enhanced model requires administering entities to meet certain benchmarks that would be monitored by the AICPA and will increase transparency to boards regarding an administering entity's performance in the peer review program. In addition, the benchmarks, each AE will be required to have at least 1 CPA on staff to lead program administration. The Tennessee Society does meet that benchmark. There are several states that didn't, so we may see some changes there. Administering entities are expected to be in full compliance by May 1 of 2018. However, not all benchmarks have been finalized. Dates for compliance for the proposed benchmarks will be determined at the time they are finalized. If an administering entity such as TSCPA decides not to administer the program any longer, they are required to give notice to the board. I'm not sure there was a time frame on that, but they are required to let this board know if they choose to no longer administer the program. The state's ethics memorandum of understanding with the TSCPA, we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later in this meeting. It's taken a little bit of time to get that through all of the approvals within the department, and we do have a revision to propose to you all later in this meeting, so we'll talk about that. TSCPA activities. I attended one of their Discover Accounting programs at Martin Methodist College in late September. Purpose of the program is to introduce the accounting profession to high school students. I thought it was a great program, and so happy to see that going on across the state in promotion of the profession. So excited to see that. Communications. We do a spring and a fall newsletter at this time. The fall newsletter, we have created the content that's with legal for review. We expect that to go out around the 1st of November via email. On a staffing standpoint, I had let you know at the last meeting that I had retained Don Mills on a part-time basis to help with a couple of cases that need to go through the litigation process. That fell through. So now we are looking to retain him via contract, and that takes some time. We've got to go through a contracting process to move a couple of those cases to hearing. What does that mean?
I mean, you say contract with him versus.
So I had told you last time that we had worked to retain him as a part-time employee.
And do that to the state.
And we can't, some change. He was asked to be a partner in the firm that he's in and felt like that was not appropriate any longer. And so I agreed. And so we're going to go the contract route, which we didn't do to begin with because it's a long process. But that's our only option at this point. Future meeting dates. The first 4 you see in the director's report have already been approved. I have added the January 2019 meeting. These meetings are falling on the 4th Monday and Tuesday of the months that we normally meet.
Do we need to approve that January 2019 date this morning?
Yes. And so we'll do that just after. It looks like I just have a couple more things on here for the statistics, and then we can approve that. You'll notice I'm just tracking there are new licenses issued. We are down this year, but I feel like that is attributed to the delay, the score release delay. We went through several months where we really weren't licensing that many folks. We had reciprocal licenses and a few initials, but I think that delay caused our reduction in the number of licenses we've issued. The last page gives you the overall population that we find. You'll notice that in the last year we issued, 697 total new licenses, but our net gain in active licenses is only around 150. So while we're adding close to 700 a year, our net gain's only about 150. So we have, a number of folks that are, closing or retiring or that type of thing. So just keeping an eye on that. And that concludes the report. So if there are questions, I can entertain those, or we can vote on a future meeting date.
Question. Do we keep track of the age of licensees? And do we have them bucketed by how many are close to retirement versus new?
We have not specifically delved into those statistics.
Any other questions for Wendy? Guess we need to have a motion to approve the meeting date of January 29th, 2019. If somebody would like to make a motion.
So moved.
I got a motion. Need a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. We need a roll call vote again. So, Wendy.
Andy Bonner,
Approve.
Janet Booker Davis, Pamela Church, Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Roberts,
Aye.
Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
We don't need to approve your report in the minutes or anything, I don't think. So, okay, the next item on the agenda is the committee assignments, and again, you have a list of those in your on your iPad. And just for the record, our four committees are the Executive Committee, the Licensing Committee, the Laws and Rules Committee, and the Enforcement Committee. And the purpose of each committee is noted on that committee assignments form. I think the last meeting asked that anybody that had any preference as to what committee you were on, that you please provide that feedback to Wendy. And I think you did get some feedback, but there was a lot of sentiment that I'll serve wherever you need me to serve, and certainly appreciate everybody's flexibility there. We'll say that the most members of the board are serving on two committees. So, we've got, I think, good committees and people are involved with more than one. So I guess, do we need to approve these committee assignments this morning?
I'm not sure we have to. It might not hurt to do it.
Let's go ahead, and then if somebody would make a motion to approve the committees as presented there.
So moved.
Okay, need a second.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion of any of the committees? Okay, let's have another roll call vote.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church, Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Roberts,
Aye.
Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is Nano Learning demo. Are we ready for that, Wendy, or do we want to?
Okay. Yes. Jessica, just to give you a little introduction, Jessica visited us at the last meeting and gave she is the director of the CPE registry with NASBA. And she addressed you last time talking about the fields of study that had recently changed. And in that conversation, we also talked about nano learning, which is a new delivery method for CPE. So we had asked her to come back and show this board a demo of what a nano learning course looks like. So with that, I will turn it over to Jessica to start her presentation.
Jessica, we thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you so much for having
Okay.
me back. I'm glad to be here. Sorry, it took a little bit of technology. That's the thing about technology. It's great when it's working, not when it's not. This morning, what I wanted to show you, and this is a repeat for Larry and for Judy, who attended the Eastern Regional meeting, I did actually show this actual nano example at the regional meetings this year. We have currently 7 providers on the National Registry that have been approved now for the nano learning delivery method. PwC is one of them, and they have graciously given me permission to share the example with you. And so I thought we would just play it and go through the components, and then I can address any questions you might have if you have any afterwards. But PwC, of course, big, large accounting firm, they have a lot of technology in their learning and development area. And when they approached this nano example, they have also created this to be device agnostic. So it would look good on a mobile phone as well as a tablet or a computer. But I will put it to full screen so it'll be a lot easier to read. The example that I am showing you this morning, it's called Timing and Reporting Issues, Business Expenses for Tax Purposes. So obviously the field of study has been designated as taxes, and the program knowledge level for this nano learning is as an overview. So it's designated as an overview. So you begin the nano, and they provide just a nice little outline of what the course entails. So there's a module for course objectives, and then there are 3 actual modules before you then advance to the qualified assessment. So if we go to the course objective, a nano again is a very, it's 10 minutes of learning, but it is based on a single learning objective. So the content is intended to be very focused and very targeted. So here, the course objective is by the time you complete the lesson, you'll be able to choose the appropriate tax treatment for travel, meals, or entertainment expenses. They have a nice feature here that's not required in the standards, but they have some very detailed features that will explain course navigation and a little more detail of the program itself. So let's go to the first module, which is, again, here they explain the introduction. Business meals and entertainment expenses are 50% deductible, however, only to the extent amounts are not lavish or extravagant. And there, Nano is a series of videos, and so I will play this and
The objective for this lesson is shown on your screen.
can you hear?
Section 274A provides that business, meal, and entertainment expenses are generally not fully deductible. In most cases, only 50% of the expense is deductible. For employees who are subject to hours of work limitations, such as pilots and truck drivers, 80% of these costs is deductible. The disallowance only applies to business meals, beverages, and entertainment. Business travel is generally fully deductible. However, limitations apply to the definition of business travel. If travel is not considered business travel, no portion is deductible. Section 274A provides the general rule that no deduction is permitted for activities that are generally thought of as entertainment, amusement, or recreation, unless certain conditions are met. Meals are included in this definition. This section further provides that no deduction is permitted with respect to a facility used in conjunction with an entertainment-related activity. There are two significant exceptions which would allow the taxpayer to claim a deduction. Meals and entertainment expenses are deductible to the extent of the 50% or 80% allowance if the meal or entertainment is directly related to the taxpayer's trade or business. Also, the deduction is permitted if the meal or entertainment precedes or follows a substantial and bona fide business discussion. The regulations provide additional guidance regarding both of these rules. The expenditure is directly related to business if it is conducted in a clear business setting, or if the amount is in the nature of a prize or award that the non-employee recipient must include in income. The taxpayer can also meet the directly related to business test if one of the following situations exists. The taxpayer can show the expectation that the entertainment would result in income or a trade or business benefit at some future point. The taxpayer can show that in addition to the entertainment, the taxpayer actively engaged in a business meeting, negotiation, discussion, or other bona fide business transaction in anticipation of future income, or in light of the facts and circumstances of the entertainment and the accompanying business activities, the activity appeared to serve a primary business intent. A few situations are specifically mentioned in the regulations that do not qualify as directly related to business entertainment. First, the taxpayer must be present at the entertainment. The client or potential client cannot simply be given a ticket to an event, for example. In that case, the ticket is considered to be a gift, subject to deduction limitations, rather than an entertainment expense. Also, the distractions at the event cannot be so substantial that it would be unlikely that any business could be conducted. The expenditure is associated with business if it directly precedes or follows the business discussion. The business discussion must be substantial and bona fide. The taxpayer must conduct a business meeting, negotiation, discussion, or other bona fide business transaction with the intent of earning income or of benefit to a business. The business portion of the day must be substantial on its own and relative to the entertainment. In general, business and entertainment on the same day will meet the test. If the two are on different days, the facts and circumstances will govern.
Okay. That's the first video. Were you all able to hear that? Probably pretty softly, but I'll try and keep that. So that's the first module. So now we go into the second module that explains the business travel is fully deductible. That gives you a warning. Be careful not to misclassify travel expenses as meals or entertainment. So we'll go on and view the second video module.
The objective for this lesson is shown on your screen.
Business travel is deductible to the extent the person traveling has a business purpose for being on the trip. The business person must also be an employee of the company. Therefore, in most cases, travel costs for a spouse or other family member would not be deductible. Limitations apply to foreign travel. In general, foreign travel must be prorated between the business and non-business portions of the trip. This proration is not required, and the full cost of the travel is deductible if the trip is 1 week or less, or if longer than 1 week, the non-business portion of the trip is less than 25% of the total trip. Travel costs are not deductible if they relate only to the education of the taxpayer. Also, limitations apply to the deductibility of travel by water, including conventions and meetings held on cruise ships.
Two. We have one more to go. So again, the intro here is that meals, entertainment, and travel expenses must be documented.
The objective for this lesson is shown on your screen.
Meals and entertainment expenses and certain other business expenses must be documented and substantiated. This documentation can be noted in an account book or expense diary, or it can simply consist of handwritten notes on a restaurant receipt. The documentation should include all relevant information about the activity, especially the business purpose of the meeting. Meals and entertainment expenses are non-deductible to the extent they are lavish or extravagant. If a portion of the entertainment meal would be considered lavish and extravagant, that portion must be subtracted from the cost of the meal before the 50% reduction applies. For expenses reimbursed by the employer, the disallowance applies to the employer, not the employee. New regulations provide further guidance regarding treatment of reimbursed expenses. These regulations are beyond the scope of this lesson. The business meal disallowance applies to all meal costs, including those away from home and those furnished to employees at the employer's premises. The limitation does not apply to reasonable costs for traditional employee social occasions, such as holiday parties or summer picnics.
Okay, so that's the content of the Nano. So again, very brief, very targeted information. And now, in order to obtain CPE credit, the standards require that you complete a qualified assessment at the end of the Nano Learning, which is comprised of 2 questions. So let's see if we can pass this qualified assessment together. So this just provides you some information that the standards require that you have to earn 100% on the Nano Learning qualified assessment to be awarded CPE credit, and that you will earn 0.2 credit. So the first question is, assume Lauren is an owner of Lauren Inc. Choose from the following circumstances where Lauren Inc. is most likely eligible to deduct 50% or more of the business meal or entertainment expense. So A is Lauren and a client have dinner once a month following a book club meeting. Lauren and a client are in a meeting on Tuesday, and on Wednesday they go to dinner. Lauren provided 2 sporting event tickets for Lauren Inc.'s largest client and his wife. And Lauren and a client went to dinner and a show after an all-day business meeting. Do y'all have a choice? D. All right, we'll go with D. We'll confirm the answer. And now, second question. This one you probably... Broadband Inc. has the following expenses: airline hotel expense of $150,000, meals while traveling $50,000, meals with clients while in town $30,000, office party for 300 employees $25,000. On its tax return, what amount can Broadband deduct? A is 115,000, B 140, C 215,000, and D 255,000. Anybody have a guess? Let's pick C. And we confirm our answer, and then let's see how we did. Let's see if we passed it. All right, well done. You passed the assessment. Now, I didn't work out with PwC for you all to receive CPE credit for this nano learning. But anyway, again, this is just one example. I mentioned that we've now approved 7 providers on the registry for nano. Every single submission has been different. So this is one format. PwC repurposed some content that they had in a self-study. So that was some of the bringing together of those 3 different modules that they had in a previous self-study program. We've had other formats where it's a video, a subject matter expert doing on-camera video with some other slides and information, graphics coming in. We've had a nano learning that is pretty much animation, not cartoony. I don't want to make it seem like it's not professional. It's but animated, but it's interactive, so that you're not just reading something or watching a person the whole time. So for all 7 providers, their content, their program that they've submitted has all been slightly different. So that's been kind of interesting to me that it allows for some innovation and creativity among the providers when putting together their program. I did want to let you know.
Excuse me, real quick.
Sure.
How is time determined? How much credit is given? I thought I saw something up here that said this should take 10 minutes to complete, and then I saw it gave you 20 minutes of credit.
It's 0.2 credit. So one credit is equal to 50 minutes of content.
I
So
got
that
you.
actually equates to 10 minutes. We do have them complete what we call a word count formula, which is basically takes the duration of the video and takes a time component to it, and then also takes into consideration answering the qualified assessment. And so basically, if you have about 6 to 7 minutes of a video content, plus the 2 assessment questions, that arrives at a 10-minute completion time.
Can individuals on these go straight to the assessment and take a quiz?
No, we do not permit them to do that, and most all these platforms have the capability to prevent that from happening. So that's part of our review process when they come to us.
Okay.
If we see that you can go to the qualified assessment, we push it back to the provider and don't allow that to happen.
Does NASBA actually approve each module or just the CPE registrant provider?
So we actually approve one program. So if they have 5 nano programs, they submit to us one, and we review that program and make sure that that is compliant with the standards. We work with them on an education process, make sure that they have a thorough understanding of the standards. Then they can add additional programs after that one has been approved using that same methodology. And then what we do later is do audits of them and just ensure that, in fact, the program.
We don't really actually have to approve every little module they submit. Okay.
It would be so expensive and overly time consuming to do that we do the approval at the entity level for that.
Where do we need to go with this? We can't really use nano learning in Tennessee at this point, can we? Do we need a change in rules or?
Well, within our rules right now, it has been interpreted that we could accept it, but we feel that it would likely be better if we clarified a lot of things about it. So I do suggest a rule change to make it clear what, who you can get it from and those types of things. And so if this board is interested in accepting nano learning from our licensees, I would like you to make that clear, and we will work on a modification to the rules to bring back to you to clarify the specifics of that.
So just to give you,
I think it's great. I think anytime people can get any type of, excuse me, education, I think that's wonderful. So I applaud the efforts here, and I hope that I'd like to see us change the rules if we need to do that. But
You want to make that in a form?
I'll make the motion that y'all adopt. Sorry, do you want to?
Oh, I didn't know. Does this fall under law and rules, or does it outside a committee, or do we need to make the motion from the law and rules committee? Or?
I think it's fine as a board to make the decision today,
Okay.
and then likely we will bring a draft rule back to the law and rules committee to consider.
Well,
I'll make a
second.
motion that we accept nano learning education, whatever you want to call it.
Second that motion. I think it's great too. I think I can see people sitting in an airport using time effectively while they wait on a plane or something to do something like this. I think it's great. I'll second that.
I agree. I think it's fantastic for people like me who have shorter attention
I'm
spans
with you, Stephen.
and get quick. I mean, these 8-hour CPEs are just grueling, and it's more of an endurance test than a better learning opportunity. So I applaud this new platform.
I was impressed
We're really
with the
seeing-
substance.
oh, I'm sorry. We're really seeing a lot of use for Nano, or the value to Nano, as reinforcement to some of these maybe 8-hour training sessions, because there's of course a lot of neuroscience that goes around learning, and how learning is forgotten very quickly. And so out of a full day session, within 24 hours you'll forget 70% of what you learned in the 8-day or 8-hour session. And so they have scientifically proven that by getting some reinforcement, some boosts after you sit in a training event, that it counteracts that forgetting curve, if you will, the forgetting of knowledge. And so it actually, we see as a valuable asset for Nano is to provide those boosts after training events, a couple days after a training event, a week after, 2 weeks after, and it just helps you recall that information. So
I want to
I would
say
like
that I
to-
was impressed with the substance. I was afraid that it just stripped out all the substance, but really it cuts to the core of the substance and limits the subject matter. So I don't think that it is really watered down. I think it's focused. And so from that respect, I think it's good.
I'd like to just thank you for taking time to present this. I did see it at the Eastern Regional, but I think it's awesome. And I think that that everyone in the profession that's getting these CPE credits will, I think, benefit from this. If and the more exposure you give to it, like to this board, I think the better. And we appreciate you taking the time and all the technical stuff you had to work through to get it going.
computer, that was the issue.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, I think. Is there any further discussion on the matter? Jessica, again, we'd like to thank you for being here and your presentation this morning, and let's have another roll call vote.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gabe Roberts.
Aye.
Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Okay,
And now that the board has voted to approve nano learning, did the board also want us legal to help draft a rule that would clarify that acceptance?
Absolutely.
yes,
Okay.
please do that.
And if any of the board members had any restrictions or any type of suggested language that you want me to put in there, you could either talk about that now, or you could individually email any ideas that you might have. I can also propose a draft that the Law and Rules Committee can discuss at the next meeting. But if anyone has any suggested
My
restrictions,
thoughts would be that it would mirror our current rule, whereby it would be an ASBA approved provider, or prior to taking, or whatever we discussed yesterday, we were talking about that it has to come before this board for approval, if not through NASBA.
Right now, CPE is allowed either through a NASBA sponsor or an exempt sponsor. So we do have exempt sponsors that are not on the NASBA registry. For example, the TSCPA is not registered with NASBA. They're considered an exempt sponsor.
Colleges and universities.
And colleges and universities. And
I have no problems with that exemption
Okay.
being in there.
Okay,
But that's
so-
me personally. I'm not speaking for everybody.
I think that's what I would like to clarify. Do you want to restrict it to only NASBA registry or to any sponsor that we already approve?
I would say any sponsor that we already approve.
Okay.
What about restrictions? Are other states putting a limit on the amount you can get this way?
I believe they probably are, but I'm not. Do you have any specifics?
That sounds familiar for some
Yeah.
reason.
I'm talking off the top of my head. Right now, I'm aware of 13 jurisdictions that already accept nano learning and have included that in their rules and regulations. Right now, I'm only aware of Texas, who has put a limitation on the number of credits to be earned under the nano delivery method.
I'm not sure why we would limit it, in all honesty. I mean,
after
if we think
seeing
it's
it,
good
I think it's
education,
good.
then I don't know why we would cap it. Let me just have 150 of these things.
Isn't there already a cap on self-study?
We actually in the state of Tennessee do not have a cap on self-study. Many
Okay.
states do, but we do not.
I think people may learn more from this instead of less, as compared to some of the
All
other.
that's going to be a lot more
programs.
difficult.
That's what the staff has said. Wait.
Ooh, that's true.
Yeah. That may be a reason to cap.
I think you'll see it more as a fill-in as opposed to, because people are still going to do a conference here and there, I think, for the most part, or in-house training or something.
That's helpful.
Okay, any other comments or questions on nano learning? Jessica, again, thanks for being here and appreciate your presentation. Next on the agenda, we have the Center for the Public Trust Ethics Course presentation, and we have Alfonso Alexander with us this morning. He's president of the NASBA Center for Public Trust, and we will turn the program over to him. I would tell you from my brief experience with NASBA, he is the Center for Public Trust. And I think he's going to have a great presentation for us this morning. So,
do you want to take a quick break? Take a quick break while he gets that loaded correctly.
okay.
Okay.
Let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back to the presentation.
Thank you.
Making pretty good progress.
All the coffee.
You're making pretty good progress. Once we get to the committees, it's all just, we're going to be out of here by 10:30, right, Casey?
Yeah.
We'll be done by 10:30.
If
Hey, you're gonna have a less than 5-minute report from me. Actually, I'm gonna try to get it to 2.5.
Hey, Debbie, here's what you do.
All right.
No, is there anything that you need? She'll still honestly. Yes, and I've got some big cases. No, actually, my network cord was plugged in here, but I'm back on now. Just the way that they had it structured before. Because I know I to my junk mail, but I'm trying to close this and then go back in.
I have I remember in the meeting or something about somebody was.
Mr. Watkins, I have it.
Will you look at it and see? Tell me what you think. Yeah. I know when I did that Expedia last month. I had issues.
Does she? That's worse than being my company. Oh, that's good.
Well, as long as they have the address and the amount and your name on it, I think it'll be okay. Thank you.
I did it through foot.
The last thing available in Nashville.
$200.
Yeah.
So Anthem's $300. Never done that before.
Yes, she won't be taking on accounting matters, but she will be doing. She has her own set of boards that are not our boards.
I gotcha.
Yeah, so this is just.
You can go ahead and just leave, and you say,
No, we want to hear what you got to say.
That wouldn't be ethical. All right. That's right. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to come share with you information. I'm just going to have a few slides that I'll present to you that I think will give you a picture of a program that we believe is a great resource that boards can use as a part of your disciplinary action. First, I want to just give you a little bit of history and background on the information. We developed an online training program now 2 years ago, and our initial intent was for that program to reach the overall business market. It was designed for individuals that may be in ethics and compliance at companies or in the HR or learning and development areas in companies to present to their company as some type of annual ethics and leadership training. But as a part of conversations that we had with the Missouri board, they expressed an issue where whenever they had some type of discipline or fine that they issued out to practitioners, in many cases they had repeat offenders. And what they started doing several years ago was they would fine an individual, but then in addition to that require them to take an ethics course. And that ethics course, though, for them was just completely rules and regulations only. Here are rules and regulations, and they weren't even specific to Missouri. They were really at the AICPA code of conduct level. So when we came out with this program, we started having discussions with them about this program and what may or may not be different about it. What is different about it, and this program is really based on behavioral ethics. It's designed to try and change the way people think and their decision making. And the thought was, if we can basically blend what is there in terms of rules and regs and add some behavioral component, then hopefully they can be in a situation where they don't have all of these repeat offenders. So what we did is we established this two-phase process with them, and we took our current product that I'll show you a little bit more about, made some minor customizations to it, and then they started using it. So whenever they issue a fine to a practitioner in Missouri, in addition to that fine, this individual is required to take this course. And as a part of their settlement, they pay the fine, take the course, submit that they've completed that entire process, and then they've taken care of that settlement there in Missouri. What happens there is there's no cost to the board at all, but that individual pays the $250 to take the course. That goes to the Center for the Public Trust. That pays for our expenses as well as helps fund some of our student programming that we're doing at the national level. You see there future phase. That future phase is where we're adding an additional model to the program. The current program is a 3-module program, and I'll show you some of the slight customizations that we made with it for Missouri. We are in the process of building out the 4th module, and that 4th module will be state-specific completely to Missouri. So, for example, we're building in some of the most important cases that the board has heard, and all of our content is based on real practical case driven content, and then teaching behavioral ethics as a part of that. So in the fourth module, there would be cases that are from Missouri. There would be issues that are the most common infractions that the Missouri board sees. And in addition to that, there'll be some things that are core, meaning here's the timing on your renewals. And in some cases, the renewals may be different than the reporting for CPE, but there will be explanations of all of that information in the module and those kinds of things. So there will be, instead of 3 1-hour modules, there will be 4 1-hour modules. And there'll be a different price point once we launch that one. It'll be $400, and that gives us our ability to recoup our development cost, both from a content development as well as the technical development side of things. And it will continue to help us to build and partner together with programming that we do throughout the state. So here's what the content looks like. The first module has 4 major areas in it. And let me say, all of this programming is built around personal development and personal ethics, but we approach it from several different angles. So you see this first module is the culture model. So we're talking to, or in this particular case, CPAs that are managing partners or CPAs that are within a practice will help be able to understand, after going through this module, how to impact a culture regardless of their role. So you see developing ethical cultures, how you increase productivity, but doing it in a way that's built on integrity, retention, based on building the right kind of culture, and then there's a management component of it as well. So that's module 1. I will say that each of these sections that you see here, at the end of it, there's a 5-question examination. So similar to what you saw with the nano learning, literally they go through about 15 minutes of content, and then they have an examination at the end. And that examination typically, or that it does have 5 questions in each of them. The product that we developed for the general market, we require 80% pass rate. But Missouri said for us, we want 100%. So these people are taking this because of bad behavior, so they don't deserve to be able to miss one. And so we said, sure, fine. We can just click a button, and it requires 100% for the individuals to pass. And that's the case for each of the examinations. So when you look at Module 1, in that 1 hour, there are 4 examinations before they can pass that and go to Module 2. Here's Module 2 there. Module 2 focuses on ethical leadership, and it talks about leadership at every level, the impact on organizations, and opportunity and responsibility that we all have in terms of leading from an ethical standpoint, regardless of our role within an organization. You see here there are 3 sections within this particular module, so there are 3 examinations there. Same process, there are 5 questions, and in Missouri's case, they have to pass at 100%. The last one is strategy. So we talked early in developing ethical cultures, and this talks about how you maintain ethical cultures, being intentional about having things related to an ethical culture, and doing things right within how you operate with your clients, as well as how the company or firm operates. Communications is a big component on communications and how to communicate with people effectively from an ethical standpoint, and engaging others around you. So that's Module 3. And then again, this one would have 4 sections in it, so there are 4 examinations in this particular portion. Same situation there, they would have to pass at 100%. If an individual doesn't pass the examination, then they come out of the system. It will reset in 24 hours, and then they can go back in and retake the examination. They don't have to review all of the content again to take a particular examination, but they can't take the examination the first time until they have reviewed all of the content. It's set up so that they can't skip around, nor can they hit play and walk away. But each of those 3 modules take 1 hour in content. So this is what, excuse me, this is what the program looks like. So an individual will get this, a link from the board, and that link will take them to a page where they pay, and then they will go in and log in on a page like this. I will tell you, this is a screenshot from our general program. So you see there it says training and certification. The program for the boards doesn't say that. But so I just wanted to make sure you know we're not saying this is a certification program for individuals that are taking it because of a penalty. So once they log in, they see a screen similar to this. Now, all of the information that you see on the right is actually, this is my login, so they wouldn't have all of that, but what they would have is what you see down here at the bottom. I said on the right, but I mean the left. What you see on the bottom left here where it says active courses, that's what they would have, and what they would be able to see is their list of active courses. And what they would have would be just simply the Missouri course in this case, or the Tennessee course, if you guys think this is something you want to move forward with. Just wanted to see a particular portion of how we've customized some of this. That gentleman there on the screen is Travis Ford. He's a board member in Missouri. He is doing some introductory comments and expressing how important this program is and the commitment that the Missouri board has to individuals operating in the highest level of ethics in the work that they do. And that's how this particular program is introduced. So that's one example of some of the things that we've done and can do from the customization standpoint. Once an individual gets into the program, the first thing they'll see is somewhat of a table of contents that just kind of shows them that in Module 1, there are 4 sections, and that explains how they look. What you see on the left side of the screen in blue is actually a true table of contents. So if you would hover, if an individual hovers over one of those, so if I were to hover over one of those in the system, then it would pop up and show me the entire listing of what that content is. But just wanted you to see how it goes from there. Then as you progress, you'll see here are the 6 objectives for Module 1. They get that listed as part of the introduction to the module. And then here you see, this is an example of kind of what it looks like. So most of the content is very similar to what you saw earlier with the PwC product, where there's voiceovers and moving text and moving images. But rather than having cartoon type images, we've selected to actually use real actual photos. So there's a lot of stock photos, but delivering the same messages, and a lot of text that come in over some of those photo imagery, that imagery. Also, we built in some actual case studies that are role plays. So this is a video role play that is in the module. These videos end up being somewhere around 2 to 4 minutes, and they are introducing a particular topic. So for example, in this one, this is dealing with establishing culture from a leadership standpoint. A manager will walk in and he'll have a conversation with 2 employees about an ethical challenge that they've been having and some training that they want to implement and so forth. And there's several other types of things that we do there, but just wanted you to see the different ways that we're delivering the content, and it's all designed to keep movement and keep things fresh. So there's movement on the screen about every 6 seconds, whether that's a change of an image, whether that's text moving in, whether it's video or what have you, so that the person stays attentive. But they really don't have to stay in a module longer than 15 minutes, because they can complete one section, go away, come back at any point. So it really is very similar to some of the learning capabilities that Jessica shared with you. This is what an exam question looks like. And you see here, it's asking what is organizational ethics, which was already covered in the content. Individual would select an answer here. And then once they select an answer, if they get the answer correct, it shows up on the bottom of the screen there, correct. And then they can move on by just clicking the submit button. If they get the answer incorrect, then it tells them incorrect, and they have the option to go back and review immediately. So this is a remediation component that we put in there. They can't go back and retake the exam then. They have to come completely out of the system after completing the rest of the exam and then come back in later, as I mentioned earlier. But they can go ahead and review where that content is covered. And all they would have to do is click on that review button over there, and it will take them back in the system to where that content is covered. This screen I wanted to show you because if you notice here, this has the menu on the left and all of that information, but this one is a full screen. So there's capability there in case individuals say, I need to see it in a larger format. This is how I take it because I need it in a larger format. So we have that flexibility there. Just like I showed you Module 1, Module 2 it starts the same way, but you see the different content areas that are in Module 2. Here's a screenshot of Module 3. So the same look and form throughout the program. Just a few other things that I'll share with you. The Missouri implementation was really quick and simple. Literally, all they did was changed something in their rules where they had a different product that they were using, and they just changed that product to this product. For them, their state law does not enable them to mandate that you only can take one product. So they listed information about our product or key components that are in our product and said, take this or one similar. And so if a person says, I've got something else, but it does all of these other things, and they still have that flexibility. But it was very simple for them, just changing one rule, and they were able to move forward. The fourth module, as I mentioned, would be completely customized for that specific state and whatever the Board of Accountancy would like to do in there. We cover the initial development cost, and how we generate our recoup our cost is with the sale of the product. So if you guys do this, the more people that you find and say, take this, the quicker we get our funding back from our cost for development. And the funding, simply, as you guys know, the CPT is a 501c3 sister organization to NASBA. And so one of the things that this will enable us to do is to take funds that we generate from revenue gain from this and other programs that we have and utilize those for the services that we offer, which fall in the area of student development from an ethics standpoint, and the partnerships that we're working with societies and other groups to provide better quality ethics CPE. So that's where the funding would go for this program. So that's my overview. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have about this program.
I like it. We were having this conversation yesterday about a program to give out as penalty.
We just talked about this very thing yesterday. Okay. What could we use as a tool for, because we already have the ethics class or the ethics requirement, but this gets more into the heart of behavioral ethics, which is what we were talking about. I mean, I appreciate you coming today. I just want to say, the more I get involved with NASBA and the related organizations with NASBA, I'm just so impressed with everything that's going on over there and the people. I mean, everybody I've met at NASBA is just so impressive. And things like this are things that are right there relevant to what we're looking for. You know, Judy and I were at the Eastern Regional and met some of the students that y'all are influencing, and Wendy was there too, and got to meet some of those students that sat at the table with us at dinner one night. And they're not just accounting majors; they're people in all professions. In fact, I met two young ladies who were in nursing, I think, and they were asking us about ethics and how it works within our profession, and they were telling me, you know, why they were interested in your courses and that kind of thing and your programs. But I just want to commend NASBA and Center for Public Trust for doing this kind of thing, because it's so relevant to what we need.
Thank you so much.
Ethics matters in every profession.
That's right. It
does.
About 50% of the students that we work with are accounting majors, and the other 50% are across all other functional areas. And initially, we tried to figure out, are there some students that we won't work with? You know, it just doesn't fit. And I almost said, well, maybe visual artists. But then I learned that there's plagiarism and other things that they deal with too. So we just said every student is open to this, because at some point they'll work in a business of some sort or have to do some type of business transaction. So that's our focus.
I think everyone in every profession, whatever it may be, is always put in a position where they have to choose to do the right thing, whether it costs them or not.
That's right. That's right. I couldn't agree with you more. So
I think this is really interesting. I appreciate you coming. Our enforcement committee was dealing with a really interesting case yesterday, specifically aimed at somebody who was relatively new to the practice. To me, the most important thing I saw, I mean, there's a lot of it was important that caught my eyes. You said in Missouri, they're basically doing a frequent flyer list, right, of the enforcement actions that they take and the things, and they're trying to address those by creating curriculum specifically geared at those things.
Right.
I think that would be an incredible opportunity for us, whether it's partnering with NASBA or CPT or even the TSCPA.
I think the society's trying to build that in.
I think that'd be great. Like every year we go back and look at what are the big things that we keep seeing over and over, and let's try to address those things. I think that'd be great.
Just so you know, that is a great idea, and we're actually talking with Missouri about some type of orientation product that all of their new CPAs would go through that has that information in it. And so we may be doing that sometime in the next couple of years, because that did come up at their board meeting. One other thing I failed to mention early on is Missouri has been kind of our pilot with this, but since the regional meetings, I've gone to quite a few board meetings, and Kansas has signed up, and we're working on their 4th module as well right now. Oklahoma has signed up. Yesterday I was at West Virginia, and they've signed up. Virginia, we'll meet with them the week after the annual meeting, and they're going to come on board as well, and so is Florida. And we've got several other meetings. And what I think is that we'll be able to develop some things that we can learn from each other. So there may be some best practices that can happen with some of these other boards that, you know, oh, we didn't think of that one as it comes to building out that custom module, because I think that there are probably some similar items that will come up, because we've seen that already as we're working on that with Kansas. They had some things that Missouri didn't have, and we presented those, and they said, oh, yeah, that's an issue for us too. So I'm hoping that we'll have a real nice framework, and then be able to share an outline to get boards started. And then they can say, this isn't as much of an issue for us, but this is. And we kind of go from there. So just wanted to share that with you guys.
Alfonso, can I clarify on the pricing? Is it $250 for the 3 modules together, or is it $250 for each module?
$250 for all 3 modules.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not making this available a la carte, if you will.
Okay.
They have to take all 3 parts if it's the initial phase, and then all 4 parts if you do the customized portion. Great question.
If you do all 4, is it $650 or is it 4?
It's 400.
Okay.
400. Yeah.
Wendy, is there anything we need to do specifically as a board to kind of endorse this program or use this program, or from our laws and rules? Is there anything that would keep us from, if we have a case and we decide to implement a monetary fine, but as part of that say, we want you to use this ethics, go through this ethics training?
In previous conversations with legal, I don't think that there's anything from a law or rule standpoint that we would have to change. We have the ability to authorize a specific course. So I think from that part, we're okay. I guess my question to Alfonso would be, what would he need from us to sign on?
Sure. Just a verbal commitment today, and then I would like to meet with you to see what some of these particular components would be in the 4th module, if you'd like to do that. If you want to start in a 2-step process like what Missouri did, then literally what we could do is get someone from the board or staff to work with us, and we produce a couple videos that talk about why this is important for Tennessee and CPAs operating in Tennessee, and then we add that or those videos in certain places, and then we could start within days, literally. But if you want to do the fourth module, just having some time to spend with you for us to develop the outline, get that back to you, and then we go back and build the content. It'll take us about 90 days to build out the content and then put the creative around it for a fourth module right now. As we do more and more of these, I think that time period will shorten because we'll be able to, as I mentioned, kind of build on a foundation and just put the specifics in from there.
Just as a another question, and maybe I may be missing something, but we've pretty much got an outline that we're using, and we're using the ethics course that the Tennessee Society has developed, and that's what we are specifically asking our CPA candidates and having people take that course, or other people that want to offer the course have to go through and use their product. Is that correct?
Right. So we have a state specific ethics CPE requirement that's 2 hours, and now we've decided that the content of that is developed by TSCPA and then can be sold to sponsors. So I think we have potentially 2 avenues. We could either decide that for now we don't want to do that fourth module, we just want to do the 3. We could also maybe add that fourth, and we would say that's not state specific ethics. It doesn't meet that requirement, or it does. That's kind of
okay, because I was just wanting to.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we have 2 things.
Because not all states have a state-specific ethics requirement like we do. So I do think that fourth module kind of competes a bit with what we're trying to do with TSCPA. So, my recommendation might be maybe we start with the 3, and or somebody may have some other thoughts.
Let me offer a clarification just to make sure. We have made a strategic decision as a CPT that this will not at all be allowed for any kind of CPE. So it wouldn't compete at all. This is only for someone who the board has said this is a penalty and this is part of your penalty. Okay, and we made that strategic decision at the beginning.
I think that solves that issue. Yeah.
And are your modules more within the, I guess, context of behavioral scenarios that are presented and you go through?
Yes.
Is somewhat different, I think, than the state specific, more focused on rules. Yeah.
I guess, Wendy, I would lean more toward having that fourth module because, again, if this is a penalty, I mean, even if it's repetitive of what's in our state-specific ethics course, that's good, I think. I think that may need some repetition.
Delineating the fact that it's not CPE totally answers that question.
Yeah.
And it gives you the opportunity, if there's some things that are headaches for staff, because these keep coming up, we can build that into it as well.
I think this is great. I think we need to move forward with whatever we need to do to.
So do we just make a motion that we?
Yes, if we could entertain a motion to move forward with this for this board.
So move.
Second.
A motion to say, is there any other comments or discussion? I mean, hearing real good comments here, and I think everybody likes this idea. Okay.
Can I clarify that we're moving forward with all 4 modules, correct?
Yes, right. That's what I meant.
Okay, that's what you meant. Thank you, Larry.
That's what I was trying to second as well.
Okay.
Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Roberts,
Aye.
Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Okay, unanimous vote. So
Now, if anyone would like to serve to help create those videos, you can certainly send me an email and let me know.
I nominate Trey.
Everybody that gets in trouble with ethics gets to see your face every time.
Oh, Lord. I'll be in trouble then.
Or wait, should we nominate someone who's not here, like Gay?
you know, if you have an interest, do email Wendy and let her know your thoughts. And I guess I would say, Wendy, you may have some specific people here you think would do a good job or be involved, in that. So
I would like to say that, I mean, honestly, probably the best person to do it for as much as it would be appropriate would be you, Wendy. I mean, you're very well spoken and you pretty much can summarize everything that's going on with this board. You probably are the expert. So
we will consider that.
Okay.
You'll be like the Delta lady.
I'll volunteer if you need a picture of somebody way in the background, just to,
we call that filler.
Filler. Yeah. So, no, do give Wendy your feedback if you have an interest in doing this. So, Alfonso, we thank you for being here. You are quite a salesman.
Well,
can I bring up something before he gets away?
You can.
Wendy mentioned earlier that I was asked to serve on the reorganization impact task force, and that task force is looking at some issues at the AICPA and their restructuring, how they're moving towards or have moved towards getting non-CPAs in the AICPA. And Alfonso is also on that committee and kind of spearheading things. I hope I'm not misspeaking. So I thought maybe if he could share some more of what he knows about what this task force is going to do with the board, if he's able to do that.
Sure. As Wendy mentioned, our first call is today, and literally with the transition that the AICP has made from the American Institute to the association, there's some things that have come up and other boards have brought to NASBA where there's some issues. For example, in board statutes, they refer to the institute. And so
Excuse me, Alfonso, I'm not even sure that all of us are aware that the AICPA is transitioned to this new structure.
Oh, okay.
I think that's true. When I was at the Eastern Regional meeting and I signed in at some class I was going to, they had the name up as something other than AICPA, and I said,
What
here.
is that?
And I didn't know anything about it.
Yes.
So if you could maybe speak to that as well. That would,
So they the AICPA merged with SEMA earlier this year. It was official earlier this year, and so AICPA and SEMA have now formed a new organization, which is the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. And so that's what AICPA stands for now, instead of American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. And they rebranded back in August, and so there are several issues that come into play. So, for example, if in your state statutes, if it refers to certain things that you're requiring applicants or even practitioners to do, and they refer to the AICPA, well, now that's a different organization. And in some states, it's very specific, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. And so that's just an example of one type of issue. Another is that there may be some contractual things that different boards may have with the Institute around CPE related things, or even in a case similar to what we talked about, the AICPA has had a product that some boards have required people to take for a variety of reasons. And when they have the certificate of completion on there, it says the new name of the new organization versus the institute. And so those are some things that have come into play. There's some issues around confusion in the marketplace from a consumer standpoint. There are also some things where there really needs to be a review of contractual things, even at a larger system standpoint, that may just need to be will just need to be looked at. And so enough boards have asked questions or raised concerns to NASBA that NASBA Chair Ted Loden and Ken Bishop decided to pull together a task force. And some people responded to Ken Bishop's article that he wrote in the NASBA newsletter, just making people aware of it. And Janet was one of those individuals that responded to that, and so she self-nominated her. So, but no, in all seriousness, there's a task force of 8 people. Some are a couple NASBA board members, 4 state board members, and 2 executive directors that all have at some point either asked questions or raised some concerns about it. And so we're going to study the issue, see what the concerns are for boards, and make a report back to the NASBA board in January, so the NASBA board can make some determinations in its work with the AICPA.
Make a comment. As a professor, this is really interesting to me to see what direction our profession's going. And as a board, as we define required education for the certificate, I think we need to really stay on top of this, because the AICPA's come out with a statement that describes the future of our profession, and it shifts away from CPA, and firms are shifting away from just hiring CPA qualified, hiring more analytics people, computer people. I think it has significant implications for education and what we require as education.
I do have one comment. I would like to say that one concern I have is I think the AICPA has forgotten that certified public accountant is in its name, and that's what they're there to do, is advocate for the CPA profession. And I have concerns that we're slipping over into a different version of the AICPA, which is not the AICPA. That's not what I signed up for, and that's, we know what our profession relies on to protect us from things. So just one thing to point out.
Alfonso, isn't it true that they've got the new international organization at the top, and then it kind of drops down, so you still have the AICPA as a board directly under the international umbrella. So if I'm not mistaken, doesn't it drop down to where you have the AICPA and their board on one side, and then you have SEMA and their board on the other side? So right there under the organizational umbrella, there's a break between the public accounting side and the managerial side. So that the institute itself, who is focused on the CPA, they're kind of at that level, aren't they? And then they really haven't changed at all. We just got a new umbrella at the top that has a different name.
Well,
but they're looking to certify people in a lot of different regards that aren't CPAs. And that's where the rub is.
Correct. That's partially true. Where some of the challenge comes in is they being employees for both organizations, both the Institute, AICPA, and SEMA, are now all employees of the association, AICPA. So that org chart that you described, rather than them being employees over here and employees over here, they're all employees of this organization. And that creates some potential challenges there, just in terms of the confidential agreements and things. And if you think, and this may be more than detailed than you really interested in, but just if you think about if SEMA does management accounting exam kinds of things, and the AICPA does a CPA exam, and now the employees that work for both work for the same organization. If we don't understand how that works, then that could become problematic. And in fact, some would argue that there's a little bit of confusion even on their side internally. as to how all that's going to work together. So
while I'm against like all these certifications, I think the reality is when technology makes its weight known in our profession in the very near future, I mean, I know where the AICPA is going with this. They would see that there's going to be a decline in the number of CPAs. That's why they're moving in the direction they're moving, because, like you said, I mean, I'm already looking at hiring IT people and database experts and people like that, because that's where the technology is going.
Yeah,
and I probably won't need as many CPAs.
I think you definitely have to have those type of people to be successful in today's environment.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're looking at it at NASBA, because I've been afraid that different groups are jumping in where there are sort of shifts and vacuums, and I have not been sure there was oversight. There was a plan. You've probably heard that KPMG is now sponsoring combined accounting and analytics master's programs in at least 11 schools. And I think part of that is because that extra 30 hours has remained sort of undefined now, but that you can sit for the CPA exam as soon as you finish the undergraduate. So I'm not saying that, I mean, they're great programs, I think. I'm not saying they're not, but I wish the profession as a whole would define what we want, and then these major shifts would happen. And I also worry that the money's going to drive the decisions. And so the AICPA is concerned about their survival, frankly, and their revenue.
Sure.
I am kind of excited that that our profession kind of looked and said, "Hey, we're, not everybody's a public accountant." And oh, by the way, we didn't even have 50% of our profession as public accountants. So now we're picking up the managerial side, and I'm glad the profession is focused and kind of on that side. Now that I've come over from the public side, I've realized that everything's kind of driven to the public side. And so I'm very impressed with where we're going as far as focusing on our CPAs that are in management. And then I'm also excited that there's more of a focus on that side, because sometimes when I was trying to pick courses, I necessarily didn't find what I needed. It was more focused, as I said, on the public side.
Sure. I think at this point, and because it's so premature, we're just literally, we're having our first call today, but I think what boards ought to be looking at or interested in is you've got certain things that are regulated, and the CPA profession is regulated, and then not the same level of regulation on the management side or the government side. And so when you mix those together, how do you make sure that the lines are drawn appropriately and they don't get blurred? And that's kind of where we're starting from, to make sure that we understand it so that we can serve the boards appropriately, and the boards can then protect the public. And that's kind of where we're starting from.
So I think that's a good point. I think the biggest concern I have is that, there's certain or areas like, peer review standards or certain A&A standards that don't apply to the management side, that apply specifically to us, that, the ICPA has a big role in. And if you start combining the two, it's just not, in my opinion, a good recipe to do that. I mean, it's kind of like taking all the board of ophthalmologists and putting them together with the cardiologists and blending them all together to come up with specific procedures for each area. I mean, you need some specialization, and the people that are in the field of doing that type of work being the ones that are actually setting the standards for that.
I was just going to say that since I'm on this committee, if you all have any comments, feedback, then please share those with me, and I'll do my best to get them to this overall task force.
Okay, if there are no further comments, Alfonso, we'd really like to thank you for being here this morning. Said you were a salesman. I think you do a great job of selling people on the idea of the Center for Public Trust. I think you've done a great job this morning selling us on this ethics program. Maybe convincing is a better word than selling, but you do a great job, and appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the partnership that we have with you guys, and I was really excited to hear all of the involvement that you guys are having at the national level. Anything we can do organizationally or I can do to help you all, please let me know.
Just remember, we're in your backyard, so when you need beta people,
okay,
it's easier than having to travel to Missouri.
Absolutely, absolutely. We like it. I love it. Thank you.
Okay. I think we'll move on with the agenda, and I think the next thing up is the NASBA Activities Committee reports. And Larry, you're listed first there. You got anything to report on the Audit Committee?
The Audit Committee met about 2 weeks ago to approve the annual audit report of NASBA and the Center for Public Trust. Met here in Nashville and reviewed the audit reports and the related correspondence from the accounting firm that go with that. Spent a lot of time also at the same meeting talking about the audit committee charter and discussed some things related to that. And it was a really good meeting. I would just reiterate that for those of you that have not gotten involved with NASBA, I mean, they're right here in Nashville. They have a beautiful office. It's a really good facility, really good people, and we worked with Michael Bryant as our liaison with the committee with NASBA. I was very impressed. But yeah, the audit committee is basically charged with approving the audit and dealing with the accounting firm, which is LBMC. And it was interesting for me to be on the other side of the audit committee, sitting, listening to the auditors talk about the reports. But it was a good meeting, good report, and it's a committee that basically has several phone calls during the year, and then at the end of the year, when the audit report is completed, we meet here in Nashville and approve the report. But I'm part of that.
Okay. Judy, you want to comment on the ethics?
Sure. We've had a few conference calls, and our latest conference call and work that we did, we haven't had a physical meeting together. I think everyone is so spread out, and it's just easier to do the calls. But we communicate through those conference calls and then follow up a lot with email and copying each person. So we just recently had needed to get some proposed revisions to the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants regarding inducements, offering and accepting inducements. And we wrote a good letter, which had a lot of good commenting from all the committee members regarding a better definition for inducements. And we've got that ready to send. I think we've already sent it, but it's due on December 8th. And so we're feeling pretty good about giving input. If anybody wants any more detail, I have the actual letter.
What are inducements? What
now?
Inducements? What do you mean?
Oh, sorry. Here's
briefly.
Here's what we define them as. An inducement is an object, situation, or action that is used as a means to influence another individual's behavior. An inducement may, but not necessarily, be given with the intent to improperly influence an individual's behavior, such that the recipient would be expected to act in a manner that is inconsistent with the fundamental principles. And then it goes on. Inducements can range from, and so anyway, we actually added some language to that part, and that's what we would like to see the definition of inducement be. Is that answer? Okay. So that's been our task this last quarter, and so we've completed that task.
Any questions for either Larry or Judy on their comments. Thank both of you for your service on the committees, and we'll move on to the board and committee reports. And Larry, you are first up with the licensing committee.
Mr. Chairman, we have recommendations for each of those to the full board today. The first one, and just as a matter of introduction, the first two relate to action that this board took a while back, where candidates for taking the CPA exam who had tested in quarter two there was a delay in the receiving of those grades, and so this board decided that in order to allow those persons to have time after they receive their grades to be able to register and take the exam again and have that taken care of if they did not pass, we allowed an extension of through December of 17, a three-month extension to retest and not lose what they had. So these first two items on the agenda related to that were persons had asked for exceptions to that rule. The first one was from Seth Coffey, and he had asked for an extension based on the fact that he had lost credit on REG and did not pass FAR. So the committee's recommendation was that if, in general, if persons were not penalized or hurt by the receiving of the grades late, that we would, even though we would look at each exception and look at its facts and circumstances, that we would not, as a general rule, approve those unless it was unusual. So the recommendation on that one was to deny the request for an extension. Want to vote on these individually?
I think we probably do. Probably need a motion. I mean, you're going to make a recommendation, which will be the form of a motion.
The committee's recommendation and motion is that we deny this request from Seth Coffey for an extension. Let me see what the actual request was.
The extension.
He had asked for an exception in his case, specific to his specific circumstances, and we would make a motion from the committee that.
Second.
Motion is second. Is there any questions or discussion on the motion?
We're denying his exception wasn't. I guess we're not seeing that as a valid exception because of
his. We decided, or the committee felt that we would only that the purpose of our extension that we gave, or that we set out to put forth to be used in general, was for persons who were harmed by the late delivery of the grades. And in his case,
he got that extension.
Yeah.
And I think
he was
one
asking
of the
for
more
an
important
additional extension
he
on
was
top of that.
asking for another. He was asking for 6 months as opposed to 3 months.
And he has an opportunity to take both of those parts before he loses any.
He could have. He had the opportunity.
No, he still has it.
Well, he said I could have sat in early July for REG and possibly sat for FAR at the end of August, but he did not do that.
He can still
He's still going to be able to sit in the fourth quarter with the initial extension you all granted.
Yeah,
but he let a couple of opportunities go.
Yeah, and I think he did that because he didn't have his scores. If he had passed in the second quarter, he would not have needed
taken either one of those points,
to take those because he wouldn't have lost any credit. And so he chose to not take them because if he'd passed, he wouldn't have needed to.
We're basically saying he was not harmed by the late delivery of the grades.
And he already received a one window extension.
Yeah.
But he would have had to have studied for those parts, even though he may not have had to take the test.
Right.
Well, he got the extension for the 3 months, so he's still good to go in December. So now he can study for them.
Good point.
Okay, any other further comments or questions on this motion? Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Oh,
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Roberts,
Aye.
Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
The second request was from Sonia Schindler, who also was a candidate for taking the CPA exam. Her request is for also an additional extension. She did not take the test in Q2, and if you remember, the extension that we did grant was intended for candidates who took the exam in the second quarter and who got a delay in receiving their grades. So the reply back to her from the board was that the extension was intended only for candidates who, because of the delay in score returns, lost credit, and since she did not take the exam in Q2, it doesn't apply to her. So the committee felt in an agreement with that decision, and we recommend that she not receive the extension that she's requesting.
That a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Got a motion second. Is there any discussion or questions on this motion?
I have a question. So this candidate, she understood that she needed to take this exam. What was it, in the second quarter? Did they get a letter or something?
She knew there was going to be a delay in the receiving grades. She did not know that this board was offering an extension to folks that sat in the second quarter and were losing credit in the third window. She chose not to sit in the second window and sat in the third window instead. Giving her more time to study was her rationale, thinking she wasn't going to receive her grades early enough from the second window to then sit again in the third. So she just delayed sitting from the second window to the third window, and therefore didn't fall in the group of everybody that we
did not give a general 3-month extension.
We did not.
To everybody.
We were
just said
very
if
specific.
Your grades were for this quarter or whatever it was, and your grades were delayed, you got a 3-month extension because the grades were coming back late. If you chose not to sit during that quarter, you weren't harmed, is the essence of it.
But if you didn't know that you might get an extension if you did sit.
We were very specific, though. I thought we sent that out to all candidates, did we not? How did we publish that?
We notified NASBA of the decision, and
Society, did they put that anything?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I believe that NASBA notified the individuals, but it may have been. We decided that at our May meeting, so of course that was well into the second.
But the bottom line is, if she didn't know and she chose not to take it,
right?
She was assuming her time frame was still the same time frame, which it is.
She was harmed.
There was no harm.
Right. This is nothing just.
Yeah, and she would have lost that testing period anyway.
Yep.
If she did not know about it and did not take it that quarter, there was
we can't grant exceptions for people who would have done differently if they had known that we were going to do something differently and pass these kids and start saying, well, if you had known, you would have done this, because we don't know what she would have done if she had known that. So.
Okay.
Okay, any further comments? And let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
No.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gabe Roberts.
Aye.
Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay, the third issue that the committee addressed yesterday was the request for approval of a firm name from Abby Lane, who had chosen to call her firm. Her last name, or her full name is Abby Lane Jackson, and she is calling her firm Lane CPAs. There was a question from the approval process as to why she was not using Jackson as her last name, but she says that she chose a name that clearly ties to her as an individual, as far as qualifications and so forth. The committee does not feel that this name is misleading or confusing to the public, and we recommend and make the motion that the board approve the name that she has chosen.
Oh, Larry, may I clarify just a minute? The reason that we brought this to you was because her legal name is Abigail Elaine Jackson.
Yeah, I left that out.
And she goes by Lane.
Yeah.
And that was the only hesitation that we had, was that it was not her legal name. And that's why we brought it to you.
Yeah, her legal name is Elaine, and she's chosen Lane. But she says that everyone has always called her Abby Lane. Okay. So the recommendation is that we approve this name for her to use Lane as opposed to another name that.
Okay, got a motion, second, Judy. Okay. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gabe Roberts.
Aye.
Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
The next case is Crystal Pino, who was applying for a reciprocal license in Tennessee. And in the application process, as you know, there was a question as to whether you've ever had a felony charge or. So this person answered yes. We asked for more information and did receive that. And it seems that the felony was related to passing some bad checks back in 2004, I believe. Has paid restitution and done all the things that were required of her since that time. And our discussions yesterday centered around the fact that due to the time period that has gone by and the clean record since then, that our recommendation would be to approve her application for reciprocal license in Tennessee.
Second.
Got a motion, a second. Any discussion on this motion?
I think it's also significant that she was 18 at the time.
On all these matters, we might note in the minutes, we had a very robust discussion yesterday, so we're, and the entire board was there, so we have debated the issues already very robustly. So, okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gabe Roberts.
Aye.
Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Next case is applicant Philip Matheny, who had applied for or had requested that we approve a course that a CPE course that he had taken for provided through the Certified Financial Services Auditor exam through the Institute of Internal Auditors. After much discussion yesterday about other similar courses that we as a board had approved in the past, including things such as Certified Financial Planner, Fraud Examiner, and so forth, and due to the content of this course being similar nature, our recommendation is to approve this course for CPE under the Accounting guideline classification.
We got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Roberts,
Aye.
Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Okay, Larry.
Okay, the last item from the licensing committee was an outline that was provided by Wendy Garvin to accompany the 2018 Tennessee State specific ethics course. The committee approved this outline and felt that it was an excellent representation of the course and recommend it for approval.
Okay, take that in the form of a motion.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this issue?
May I just clarify that this outline will be presented to TSCPA to cover these items in the state-specific ethics course for 2018.
Have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Roberts, Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Okay, that concludes your report, Larry. Next up is the laws and rules. Excuse me, Wendy, do you have something?
I was just going to ask if we might do the enforcement committee before we do law and rules. Huh?
Mine's going to be very fast.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine.
Very quick.
Okay.
Okay, Laws and Rules Committee, Gabe Moon is chair of that committee, and she could not be here today. She is traveling, and Trey Watkins has graciously agreed to serve as today's chair of that committee. So, Trey?
Our committee yesterday reviewed the CPE rules that had been processed and reviewed by the Attorney General. Received comments back, which staff went over yesterday. Our recommendation is that this board approve the rules as listed in your iPads.
Second. Oh.
So you make that in form of
That's
a
a
motion.
motion.
Okay, in a second. Is any discussion on this issue? Let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Roberts,
Aye.
Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Okay. The second thing our committee looked at was the revision to the fictitious names rule. We went over those changes yesterday, and our committee is making a motion that we approve the rules as presented.
Okay, we got a motion.
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion on this issue? We handled it very quickly yesterday, and I think it's clearly presented, but I would ask if anybody feels like they need to make any comments today.
I'd like to add one thing.
Sure.
I know Gabe and I have had some previous conversations about these rules, and he had brought up an issue under number 2, and I added some more.
I've looked at it since. I
You're
think we're good. Yeah.
Okay.
If
That's just what I wanted
so.
to clarify,
Yeah.
because I know we didn't talk about that yesterday. Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we got a motion and a second. Let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Roberts,
Aye.
Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
Just as an announcement for the Law and Rules Committee, your peer review rules have been approved by the AG for the pre-approval constitutionality, and we'll be moving on next week to the governor's office.
Good. And the last thing that was on our agenda was the nano learning, which I presume has already been handled. So that concludes the lawn review.
Okay. The executive committee is next. Well, let's defer that until last and let the enforcement committee go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a robust conversation yesterday. All of you were there. We did two things. We reviewed the complaint statistics that Wendy presented to us, and then we went over the legal report. The legal counsel has handed out a new legal report that's updated. It's in track changes. For the record, there are 31 total items on the report. The committee discussed and amended numbers 12, 15, 26, 27, and 28. We asked that number 23 be reopened for further investigation, and we recommended that number 31 be closed. The remainder of those items, we as a committee approved the recommendation as included in the legal report, and so I'll submit the legal report as amended to this board, and we would recommend that you would approve it.
It's a motion. Do we have a second to that motion? We've got a motion, a second. Now, is there any discussion? Again, for the record, we had a very robust discussion yesterday that I think lasted almost 3 hours and got into a lot of detail, and do not see the need to repeat any of that today because everyone was there yesterday. So any other comments or thoughts on the legal report? Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gabe Roberts.
Aye.
Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
All right, and the last item I'll conclude, Mr. Chairman, by saying that you're right. We had a 3-hour meeting. I've always been told that it's the chair's fault if you don't stay on time. And so what I'm committing on the record to this group is that we're fixing this. We will not have a 3-hour meeting next time. A couple of ideas. I'm going to have some off scheduled calls with legal, with C&I legal, and with our legal counsel. And some of the ideas we're going to do is to put all of the things that are recommended closures or letters of warnings on a consent agenda that is sent out prior to the meeting. To the extent anybody wants to pull those off and discuss them, we can, but otherwise we're moving forward and we're going to do that. We're also going to talk through with legal counsel my expectation that we get we have a full and robust description of the issue in the report, which we need for the record. We all get this report well in advance of the meetings. We can review those, and I want a 1 to 2 minute brief, very brief synopsis of the issues and the penalty recommendations. If you remember last year, this committee requested our legal staff prepare a penalty matrix that would make sure that we're being consistent in the types of penalties we're doing. We've all reviewed that. I think it may even come up for further discussion later, but my expectation is that that will be the guide for legal going forward. And so instead of having to confirm and say, are you making sure that you're doing something consistent with what past practice, we're going to assume they did. And to the extent that they have a deviation from that, we ask them to bring that to our attention. So we have, again, a 1.5 to 2 or 3 minute synopsis of the cases we're discussing. We move forward and we approve those. So hopefully we'll have a good bit of efficiency moving forward, because one way or the other we'll fix that. And that concludes the last thing. We also had a discussion about one case specifically related to some question about investigation procedures. And so Mr. Glendorf and I just had a conversation. And what we're going to also do in these one-off phone calls is talk through what C&I's procedure is. I understand they differ based on the types of boards there may be here and the types of regulatory enforcement and oversight that there are. And he did assure me that there are standards that they use. And so what we're going to do is talk through some best practices going forward, where if in the investigation of one complaint some different things arise, how we address those and how we wait to see those until they've finalized everything. So I appreciate Mr. Glendorf, I appreciate our legal counsel, and we look forward to a more efficient meeting in the future. That concludes the Enforcement Committee report.
What's wrong? Sound like great ideas, and I'm encouraged. There's an item under old business, discipline matrix, civil penalty guidelines. Should we talk about that now, or leave it in?
I don't think it's necessary. All we're going to ask is for your approval to post that to our website, as most other boards do.
Seeing that, could we get a motion to
One quick question: as long we have language on there saying that this is not, we're not binding ourselves to this.
That's
right?
okay. That's
Okay.
that was my question.
I'd make the motion that we approve the board them posting this on the website.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion on the discipline matrix? Let's have a roll call vote on that.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gabe Roberts.
Aye.
Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay. The executive committee actually did not formally meet yesterday. We did not have a quorum, so we will cover all of that business in a full board meeting today. And I'm going to rely on Wendy to handle a large part of this discussion. The first item, bullet point on the agenda, was the fiscal year 17 closing and the fiscal year 18 year-to-date financials. So those are on your iPad. And Wendy.
Sure. Thank you. I think we'll start with the first item on the agenda, which is your FY17 closing numbers, and then we'll get into where we are currently. So the first document within that PDF is your official closeout from FY17. And so we had licensing revenue of $1,037,840, case and complaint revenue of $50,917, less our state regulatory fee of $90,000, gave us a net revenue of $998,217. We are then assessed cost backs from the department that include administration, investigation, and legal fees. Those totaled $223,657, which leaves us with a fiscal year balance of $219,263. That was moved to our reserve, which brings our reserve balance to $1,101,382. So that is your FY17 closing. Before I move forward, are there any questions on that?
Our reserve just continues to grow, and I'm just concerned that our practitioners have paid all this money in, and at some point somebody's going to think that's a lot of money.
I have a couple of comments about the significant amount of money we put in this past year. First, as you'll see in the proposed budget, we are going to see a reduction in revenue because of the 65 retired by roughly $32,000 a year. In addition, our salaries in the past fiscal year were a little off. We had several months without an investigator. We had
Staffing.
just some staffing issues, so I expect that number will be higher as well. I feel your concern, and I look at that as well. My understanding is that once you get to, and I think the department is looking to define this as well, is at what point do you decide that you need to talk about fees and potentially reducing them? So we are in talks.
Probably won't let us run a deficit either, so we can't eat
Right.
into it, right? So it's you're kind of caught.
Right.
Wendy,
right.
we have had a licensing fee reduction.
Yes.
For those that may be new to the board, but that was been, what, 3 years ago?
I want to say it was 2013.
Like 4 years ago.
Something
and
like that.
I know we did, and as I recall, that was like $10
Correct.
per renewal.
From 120 to
fee.
110, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been through that, and then we've kind of been through this metamorphosis of people, of, you're coming on board, new investigator, not full staffing. And so I think what you're telling us is when we look at the new budget, we're going to see that we're not really anticipating any kind of surplus of going forward.
Correct.
So,
I think our revenue is gonna drop.
Yeah.
To some degree, enough that's going to make a difference, and I'd like to see our way through that. to see how that's going to affect us.
May I ask another question? Because I think, even this morning, as we've all kind of encouraged new people and other board members to go to these regional NASBA regional meetings and to the annual meeting as well. So would it? I'm just saying, should the board consider? I see that it's greatly increased in the budget for 18, but if we really start getting more active, and it appears that we're doing that with NASBA, if we were to go in deficit in 2018 because of spending more on travel, would that not, are we not allowed to have a deficit one year that would reduce that balance? Or
I would caution,
how does that work?
I would tell you, just from being on the board the past 6 years, that I would caution this board on exploding a travel budget. Because that has been a huge issue for CNI in the past.
Okay, training, is that, does that go under travel for the training?
In the
part?
training line item are the registration fees for NASBA. It's not the rest of the travel, but it is the registration fees do fall there. So to answer also the deficit question, you can run a deficit 1 year as long as you run positive the following year.
Okay.
Now,
every other year.
But you run the risk if you run negative 1 year, you have to run positive, or you have to go in front of government ops.
Okay.
Well, and isn't part of the reason for the budgeted increase in travel the fact that now we have an investigator that's going to be traveling all over the state, incurring mileage or what have you, or car expenses that
mainly
you'll see
that the travel is somewhat related to that, but it's mainly related to more interest in board members going to the NASBA event. So I've slotted in another spot there. Casey is expected in his role to attend those meetings, so he will be taking up a spot, and we'd like to make sure there's still 3 spots for other members that would like to attend. So that's in my future budget.
That clarification.
Okay, and are we comfortable
I'd be
with the
getting
computer?
a little bit ahead because as she presents the new budget, she's got some detail in there that might help answer some of these questions. So
I had 2 quick questions. One, my earlier comment about doing an aging of people with their license. I guess one of the reasons it may be helpful is to try to figure out future potential budget issues. If everybody here is...
Do we have birth dates on licensees?
We do, and in fact, with this inactive 65, we are making a concerted effort to make sure we have every birth date on file, because that will affect...
Surely our new accounting database system will tell us that, right?
Another question I have is, I don't know the intricacies of this, but I wonder if there's an appetite for a license fee reduction. Is there a way for us to do it as a one-time, non-recurring out of our reserve balance?
Yeah, some other states are doing what they call a fee holiday, and I don't know if that's feasible in Tennessee, but I can certainly look into that.
Like not pay when you bring it back, it looks like you're taxing them. They did the payroll tax on it.
If you're going to do it, that'd be a good way.
It would be a one-time.
Commit yourself, except for 1 year, and just say we'll have it.
But we heard that at the regional meetings. I don't know if you recall, Casey, but there was another state or two that had done that.
Well, and don't we renew on a biennial basis? So then we'd have to finesse that, because if we just did 1 year,
correct,
the other half, whoever's in the out year would not get the benefit of that.
Right. So that's something to take into consideration. Yes. Okay, so to continue within that same document, now we're going to talk about just briefly where we are year to date this fiscal year. That started July 1st. And of course, I only have financial information for 2 months in, so we're relatively early in the game. The one item I think, or a couple of items to note, is that our revenues so far are down 15% to the prior year. And this is attributed mainly to the decrease in initial licensing as a result of the Q2 score delay. Currently, licensing revenue is $11,345, and our case revenue is $14,428 of the total. One of the other items to note is the third-party professional and administrative services is quite a bit lower than the same time last year, and our NASBA dues have not hit the financials as of the time I had received this. So in general, those are the two items I wanted to note there. Are there any questions as to where we are year to date that I can answer? Okay. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the travel and expense, which we typically share with you. Any travel expense that I've had or our investigators had over the past quarter. So you will see that under the travel document, and it outlines my travel and Sherry's. Mine consisted of the regional meeting, fell over into July since it was so late in June. I did the AICPA peer review conference was in Nashville this year, so I did attend a small portion of that. The TSCPA Discover Accounting program, that falls in there, and then under Sherry's, she has some investigative expenses as well as I've had her individualize her state ethics presentation, so you can see where she's spoken and the expenses associated with that. Are there any questions related to travel? Okay, so the meat of this is the proposed budget for FY19, and so that's in a separate document, FY19 budget proposal. So I'll go through this in a little bit more detail just to make sure we've covered it all. I also made a small mistake in the documents I sent you in advance, so the document on your iPad is correct, hopefully. Okay, at the beginning of the document, you will see our actual numbers from FY16, FY17. You'll see our budget for the current fiscal year, and then the last column represents my proposed budget for FY19. And I'm going to kind of go through the narrative, and then you can ask me questions along the way if we need to. So the projection of our gross revenue does not include the case and complaint revenue. That is considered, from a best practice standpoint, we can't rely on case and complaint revenue. So it is typically, I inadvertently included it in the budget for the current fiscal year. So that's part of this significant difference in the budget for the current year and my budget for FY19. So actual revenue from prior years, we also anticipate an annual decrease in revenue of approximately $32,000 with the inactive licensees over the age of 65 no longer paying any renewal fees as decided at the last meeting. So that is reflected in the revenue number that's less than what we've seen in the past. The second line item talks about our state regulatory fee, which comes out of our revenues. This particular fee is $10 for each renewable individual license, and there's also a $5 fee assessed on each active firm license. This ultimately covers the indirect costs associated with the Department of Commerce and Insurance from a high level, including the Fiscal Human Resource Department and the Commissioner's Office. Salaries. Our salaries are detailed in the attachment A. This assumes a staff of 4 plus myself and the investigator. And as you'll see in the attachment, I try to give you some more detail on this, where I show that the annual salaries, as well as a potential increase. We never know exactly what the raises are going to be. That's decided at the Department of Human Resources level. So I plug in a number there. We also have something called longevity pay. Each member or each staff member that's been here 3 years or more is eligible for longevity pay. It's $100 per year of service. And I've outlined in your attachment those folks that would be eligible and the total amount there. The other thing that's falling within our longevity line item that increases it from the $2,000 to the $6,000 that you see there is that this particular line item includes any bonuses that might be paid. Individuals get a raise based on merit, but they can also receive bonuses if they exceed expectations. So that's kind of an unknown number, but I've factored that in there. So our total salaries of $346,000. I'm sorry, total salaries for staff at $346,500. Our benefits are 37% of that, and we find that at $128,205. At the bottom of attachment A, you'll see the salaries for the staff minus the longevity of $340,000, plus the longevity, the benefits, and then of course board members are paid for their service. Gabe is a state employee, so he's not subject to that, so that's why that's 10 instead of 11. So our total personnel budget's at $478,000. So I know all of that. I try to give you the detail, but it can be confusing. So before I move on, are there any questions about the salaries? Okay. Okay, going on down, just the other specifics. Employee or travel is detailed in your attachment B. It's very similar to the travel budget I've had for prior years. As I've mentioned before, I've added a slot, an extra board member for each NASPA meeting, just to make sure everyone who wants to go is able to go from a budget perspective. Communications and shipping, this covers our postal charges, which includes renewal letters, wall certificates, anything we send by certified mail.
Hey, Wendy, just on
Sure.
on that travel.
Yeah.
How CNI, they see our budget, obviously, right?
Yes.
They y'all are back and forth on, do you work out this budget with them too?
No.
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 Okay. Now, on the travel lines, since we've had all these issues in the past, I just want to make sure there's some dialogue as to what we're doing there and how we're doing
they
it.
receive this, so
So
once
they have
you
the
all,
opportunity to ask the question. I
right,
guess.
once you all approve this, this is submitted internally, so they have the documents. They know what the plan is. I will say that this is almost half of what it was a number of years ago.
I appreciate that too.
Yeah.
Typically,
we have come in under budget, as you see as well. I plan for what I think is reasonable and I want to take advantage of, but a lot of times we don't spend that monthly, or maybe we don't spend as much on investigations or that type of thing.
Got it.
One other thing, Wendy, just to go back to employee benefits, will you just make sure there's 128.5 on the lead sheet, but then it's 128.205 on the detail?
I just rounded so we could.
Oh, okay.
So we could just keep.
Since you're sending.
Okay.
I mean, it's
the
immaterial
accountant nature
amount.
in
I
us.
just want
I'm
to make
sorry.
sure.
They have to
That's the
agree.
kind of thing they'll check.
A comment
Got
there,
all of it.
looking at the overall, though, I think addresses Trey's concern about continue to run surpluses, because if this budget turns out to be true, we wind up with an excess of revenues over expenses of $200.
Correct.
But that's not counting.
That's not counting case and complaint.
Case and
So
complaint fees.
we've ranged anywhere from 18,000 to 50,000 in the past 3 years or so. Yeah.
And Wendy and I talked about why we can't estimate those,
Oh, yeah.
but she says we just can't. And I guess there's my standpoint, with regard to licensing revenue, we already know that we've got a certain number of members and the licensing fee is X amount, but we haven't assessed any penalties at this point, and I guess the state takes.
There's a variety of factors why that might not come to fruition. You may assess them, the person may not pay them, the person may decide to go to a formal hearing and nothing's charged. There's a variety of reasons.
And also,
Certainty, but as a good accountant, I would put that in my budget, but apparently we can't do that. So,
Are staffing levels appropriate at this point?
I believe so, yes.
You've got sufficient staff.
Yes.
Okay.
One other thing I would ask is, are they, when they review these CNI, are they basically don't look at it as an overall amount. So if we were to spend more on travel or computer related items, if we're still in total under budget, they do look at it that way, or they don't?
They see it, but I think if you're over in one area, but your total is
that's what I wanted to,
your total line item. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess we need a motion to approve the budget, the fiscal year 19 budget.
Yeah, unless there's any other questions. I didn't fully go over the rest of the narrative, but I'm not sure there's anything.
Well,
I think we addressed some of the big areas.
I'll make the motion that we approve the FY19 budget as presented.
Second.
Had a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the budget or any further questions for Wendy? Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Wendy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gabe Roberts. I'm sorry, he's had to leave.
Oh, okay.
Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Yeah, I may have lost track of. Do we need to approve the revised MOU with the state of Tennessee, and would this be the appropriate place to do that?
Yes, and your agenda on your iPad, I've added it, but it was not in your initial agenda. But
Okay.
yes, we need to discuss that.
Okay.
So on your iPad, you're going to see revised MOU is the PDF you're looking for. Just to give you a little information, the board previously approved this MOU. This is an agreement or a memorandum of understanding between the TSCPA and this board about them offering the state-specific ethics course. After you approved this, it went through some internal review and approval, and there had been some concerns noted, and we made some changes suggested internally. And these mainly revolve around having the TSCPA advise this board what they're going to charge for the course. It doesn't require your approval. It's just making sure you're aware of what they're charging for their online product as well as what they're charging the sponsors for the product. And then they have to give 60 days notice of any change in that pricing. So that's the extent of the changes that we are requesting you to look at and approve.
Well, I think it still can be. I guess Gabe had left some questions, and one of them revolved around the 10% that you had just stricken out.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, but I think kind of one of the things he's asking about that was, is the society charging a different rate for members and non-members for this course?
I can let Kara speak to that. My understanding is that they will not be charging a different rate.
To the online course, we currently charge $35 for members and an additional $20 for non-members. We've not discussed having a change of that when the MOU goes into place, but
I think our concern, or I think what Gabe was trying to highlight is that we're going to exclusivity with the society, and as such, we represent the entire profession, not just society members. And if we're forcing them to go down the route of doing that, you've now got a tiered pricing system between your members and people who are not your members.
Right, and that makes sense. I think just to clarify for the board, there will still be multiple options. So there's the online course, but for live courses, there will be multiple options that licensees will be able to choose from. Other vendors will come to the TSCPA to purchase that live content, but if a licensee or a firm or another nonprofit organization wishes to engage another vendor to provide that live course, then they have every right to do that. Certainly happy to go back and talk about it. I don't personally have any concerns. I'd want to go back and talk to Brad about that and
They're
our board.
consistent between for everyone.
Right.
I guess was kind of the concern. Okay. And the other question that he had was that if we're intending to grant exclusive right to do ethics with the society, I presume, should we state that so as to give staff an easy out when people submit or try to submit for another ethics program? Have we actually given you, we've got this memorandum of understanding. What happens when somebody calls and says, I want to do an ethics course in Tennessee?
At this time, we are explaining to them that it is the board's intention to approve this course because of issues in the past with inaccurate content and that type of thing, and that the intent is that this is the only course being approved.
Yes, I think his point was, do you need more cover from this board to basically state that they are the sole source provider? I know that we try not to actually say
I don't
that,
think we're going to be able to do that with
Right.
this mechanism. We would have to go through a sole source contract, and it's just not likely to be a route we can take.
I thought we had a motion and voted that we were going in this direction.
So
I think we did it in a very generalized way,
the
though, so
rule-
as to not exclude
the rule
potential.
The rule doesn't require you to approve 1 or 2 or 3. It doesn't require you that you approve a certain number. And so my understanding is this board has said this is the one we want to approve right now.
Because as you heard today, NASBA is talking about doing state specific, which also presents another kind of
But that,
potential issue down the road.
well, that is not a CPE. As he said that would
No, but he was said they were working with Missouri to develop a state specific, in addition to the penalty one, if I remember correctly from that slide.
No, that whole interactive
Strictly all
is
penalty?
strictly all penalty.
Okay.
Is my
And then
understanding.
That was my
I
understanding.
knew there was
too.
behavioral, and then he said state specific, and I thought he was saying they were going to allow
Behavioral
that for that.
state specific.
But if they do a state
Being the
specific,
fourth
I don't
part.
know why they wouldn't try to use that for.
said no CPE for that 4 module. Now they maybe I misheard. They may be doing something outside of that, but as far as that 4-hour module, even though there's a state specific ethics component at the end, it would not
It would not be.
be.
I don't know why they wouldn't do it though.
So when I asked that question, that's
So part of the
They were-
purpose of the agreement is to ensure to this board that there is a course available to licensees. If you start to receive feedback that it's not going well, the pricing isn't where you want it to be, you really still have the option to approve something else. But it's been this board's intention that, based on our history over the past several years and the problems we've had, that they'd like to have more control over it, and this is the way to do that.
And we sunsetted all those in existence.
Correct. Those all expire 12/31/17.
and we've notified all those.
Those
and
have
they've
been
had time for
notified about
comment.
the expiration.
Yeah.
Now, we've been unable to really communicate the future plan, and since this has not been finalized yet.
If we were looking to see who would come back and say, I want to submit a new one for next year. Right.
I have talked to a couple of the previous sponsors, and they respectfully understand what the board's decision is.
Some of them are even going to go through the society.
And they may
I
go
think,
through the society,
to do
yes.
whatever it was they were doing. Okay. I'll make a motion that we accept the memorandum of understanding as presented.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion or comment?
May I want to be absolutely sure and clarify that the one on your iPads is the one that has that 10% stricken. Is everybody looking at that document?
I was.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to be clear. Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
Other questions or comments? Let's have a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Hooker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Casey Stewart,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay, is there any other old business we need to talk about?
I think that concludes the executive committee. Is that correct?
It does,
Okay.
yes. Under new business, we have one item to discuss there, and either Wendy or Larry, you want to talk about?
Yes. Why don't you?
Well, about a month ago, Dr. Richard Rand, who is head of the accounting department at Tennessee Tech, contacted me and asked me if I'd be willing, as a member of the state board, to do a presentation to their ethics class. They've started a master's program, a MAC program, and they were going to have an ethics portion of the class. And so he asked if I'd come and do an interview, and the intention was to actually tape that interview and use it for future classes. So I contacted Wendy and said, I don't know if this is okay or not, but run it up the flagpole. She checked with legal, and there are some concerns I think that legal had, and I'll let you cover those because I have not talked to anybody, but I could not, according to the way I understand it, I could not talk in an official capacity. It would just be.
Oh, it's by Larry Elmore.
Yeah. Well, here, see, I'm a tech grad, and so that's why I can't think of any other reason why he would choose me. But
they're paying you thousands of dollars.
Yeah, his email said, sit down and do an interview about your role, about the board and its duties. Great for our students to see the connection, make the connection between a board member and a tech. I'm on the advisory board at Tech. My initial reaction was, let Wendy do this and let me just go and sit in the background, kind of like you said you do on this. And that way it wouldn't be an actual board member answering the questions. And I could do I remember when I was on campus, never thought I'd be on the board, that kind of thing, and let her do the official answering of the questions. And this may come up for other people too, and so that's why I thought it'd be
the issues. Just out of curiosity.
Essentially, we just need the board's approval for you to go speak. That's why we brought it before you guys today.
Issues.
Wendy just couldn't give you the go ahead without the rest of the board saying that it was okay for you to speak.
And I have no problem
about
if
the
y'all
board.
say no. In fact,
I have no problems if you go.
Liz, that's my understanding. We just need to approve this today, but do we need to approve it with a provision that any comments there would be a disclaimer that these are.
You can approve Mr. Elmore to speak about board matters if that's why we're here. If we didn't have the approval, he could speak in his own personal capacity, but it would be limited to that. So the board can vote to approve him to speak about, operation of the board, things you typically see, sometimes how you handle disciplinary issues, just generally, not anything specific. But
what if someone calls me on the phone and asks me specific questions? Do I have to say, well, I've got to get board approval to answer to talk to you? I mean, it's the same thing, right?
Or you would just have to state that I'm not speaking in official capacity, but this is my experience.
My recommendation, what we see.
Why can't you just say at the beginning of the interview, I'm not speaking in official capacity, and then roll on down the road?
Yeah, that's what we see when the SEC or the PCOB representatives come to speak to groups. The first thing they have is a disclaimatory statement that says, I'm not speaking in an official capacity and representing a position of the full body, be it SEC commission or what have you. My guess is, panel, I'm sure, you're talking, occasionally in your classes about what the board's like.
I was just thinking, I do sometimes tell things of interest, so I'm wondering.
I think in your everyday interactions, it's fine to give that disclaimer and say, this is my own opinion. But in this case, Tennessee Tech did ask Mr. Elmore to come speak about board issues specifically. So that's why we were asking for the board approval in this situation. In your everyday interactions, you can say the disclaimer of this is my personal opinion and I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. But for this presentation where Tennessee Tech has reached out and said, we want you to come talk about how the board operates. That's why we're bringing it before you today. And typically in our other boards and this board as well, for these more official presentations, we do seek board approval for our board members to present. Usually Wendy is the person that presents at functions like this, but you guys have prior given her the authority to do so.
One concern I have is he's planning on videoing this. Concern I have is that he's planning on videoing the interview and using it for classes in the future, so we don't have to go do this every semester. And
I think it would be a good idea for Wendy to do that with you, only from the standpoint of we don't see the day-to-day operations around here, and there's certain things he might want to know that you're not going to necessarily be able to answer, and so it might be a good teamwork type thing. But I think it's also a good PR effort for this board to get out in front of these folks and be seen.
I think
and
so
have them
too.
understand who we are and what we do.
And I think
I'd be happy for Wendy to.
I think Wendy will be a good handler for you. A good.
Sure.
I think maybe from a policy perspective, what we do is we can standardize or promulgate to us the disclaimatory language that the lawyers would prefer for us to use to make it clear that we're not being able to act in an official capacity singly on behalf
If Wendy
of the board.
goes, that is official, right?
Yeah,
If she's official, does he need to be official if that's the case?
I think it would be better if we
Authorizing.
Yes, just it would be a lot smoother that way if he felt like he had a better
I make
answer
a
to the
motion that
question
Larry
than
Elmore
Wendy.
be authorized to speak on our behalf or to answer these questions with the school.
And also, if we do have a list of the questions ahead of time, and you want me as legal to review some of them and kind of give Mr. Elmore some feedback.
I have that now.
Okay.
In a general way, he told me, he said, I'll ask you what the board does, how it is structured, the processes they use, ask about CPE tracking and licensing, the importance of ethics in the profession, consequences for violating the code of ethics. I will not ask any questions about specific actions the board has or would take. I've got an email here. The one problem is he wants to do this prior to November the 5th, and I think the annual meeting is next week. When we back?
Back on the 1st.
You and I can work that out.
And if Wendy can't make it, if you would like to send me with you instead, that would probably be fine. Or if the board wants to authorize just you to be able to speak on behalf of the board, that would be okay too.
I would just say, I with all deference to the lawyers in the department and in the world, I have seen, for example, with the PCAOB regulatory body, they are hamstrung by their legal processes and staff, and they are a very comparatively less effective regulator than the SEC, which has 70 years of interaction with the profession. And while the SEC people make the same disclaimer, they are out there flying the flag and getting their points of view across. And I just don't, frankly, want the lawyers in our organization to, muzzle appropriate activity on the part of sitting board members or former board members for that matter. And so I want us to be a little cautious about, throwing the cone of silence over the interactions that individual board members may have, provided that they're making the appropriate disclaimers.
Maybe legal could come up with, a 1 or 2 sentence disclaimer that might be appropriate, that they feel is appropriate.
And if I could just clarify, I don't think legal's intention would ever be to tell you what to say and what not to say. I think the only thing that most of the questions we get are legal questions about what are violations under the statute, what are not violations. And sometimes where we have concern is that if a board member speaking on behalf of the board answers the question point blank period, you have just made a decision as a board for everybody to go, and it's kind of hard to walk back from that. And so we don't like is for y'all to get trapped in questions that are really difficult to answer or whatnot. But so far as how the board works and how you operate and the idea of your industry. You all know your industry. That is absolutely free for you all to talk about. We just want to make sure that if you are being asked a question that could have long-term consequences on the board unintentionally, that we would at least be able to say, like, I wouldn't answer that specifically, or whatnot, but that's all that we would do. And generally, legal counsel goes to many of these things and interacts with the crowd too also. So that's just a service that we offer, but
Appreciate that clarification very much. Thanks.
Well, with the disclaimer, can't that include that he's not making board decisions or?
Yeah, I think,
or even, I guess, speaking on behalf of the full
right, and that's
board.
keep in mind these are students; they're not practitioners that I'm talking to.
Right,
so
right.
None of them are ever going to say, "Well, you said this."
It's on video for life.
Right, and I think that's what
you're on YouTube. You're on everything.
And so that's what the original question was: is that if you got authorization to speak on behalf of the board, then when you walked in there, you have the authorization to speak on behalf of the board. So if you make the disclaimer that I'm only speaking on behalf of myself, then nobody can hold it, the board to it. But if you walk in there and say, I've been authorized to speak on behalf of the board, then you are, in fact, speaking on behalf of the board.
What does legal want us to do? That's all I'm asking.
We always say is that if you're going to go, if somebody's asking the board to come and speak as the board, then that individual should get approval from the board to speak on behalf of the board. And, that's
a lot of legal speak. I mean, my point is you're going to answer questions about the operation of the board. Is that the board asking the board? I'm getting turned around in terminology here, but should we go ahead and approve him to go do this? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to complicate this issue. Really, this was more of a procedural matter. We just wanted to make sure the board is okay with Mr. Elmore going to speak about board matters at Tennessee Tech for students.
I feel like if Wendy goes with him, that she's an official representative of this board.
So if Wendy doesn't go with me,
I wanted to say but I wasn't going to say it as well as you did.
That if we're going to have somebody that's there in an official capacity, I feel like you need to be there in an official capacity with her. But maybe that's not the case. I don't know.
Why does he have to speak for the whole board?
Well, and it's more so for your knowledge. We just don't want to have individual board members just out at different schools and events speaking on behalf of board matters without the rest of the board knowing about it, without the rest of the board being okay with that.
I think it would be good that the board knows that other board members are out speaking, but I don't know why any board member would have to go out and speak on behalf of the whole board.
I'm not a fan of this Mother May I approach. I would just argue this is an unofficial. Provide the disclaimer. I'm one board member. I can't act singly on behalf of the board. I'm going to give you my opinions, and I would not compel Mother May I in advance preparation, given that we meet only 4 times a year for these kinds of interactions.
It sounds sort of worse to approve him to speak in an official capacity, because then he could say anything. As long as he's just speaking on his own behalf.
Get a drink in him.
It's okay.
God only knows what will happen.
Into events where a Federal Reserve or FDIC or somebody like that speaks, and what they have done is in advance they have given a copy of either the questions and answers to the board or legal, and or they have had their speech approved in advance, and thus they don't really get off of that speech, or they don't really get off of that question and answer. Then at the end of that presentation they say, okay, now I'm representing myself and not the board, and then they offer personal input as to what they just talked about. But
I think we should make legal watch the video when he's done.
I'm not sure I want to do this now. I'm going to be so nervous about saying something.
I guess I was going to give you an example. Our Architects and Engineers Board was asked to do a town hall forum at an engineering conference here at the Music City Center a couple weeks ago. And the board approved the engineering members to speak on behalf of the board at the town hall at the convention. I attended along with them. So for the first hour or 2 portion of the town hall, the board members spoke on behalf of the board with me there to answer any legal questions that were a little bit more complicated. I was also there to correct them if for some reason they misspoke on behalf of the board. And then towards the end of the session, a few members gave their own personal opinion with the disclaimer that they were not speaking on behalf of the board. So that's just one example of what another board has done in the past.
We actually have a motion that's been made.
I'll withdraw it if I need to.
Okay.
I'm happy to withdraw.
Do we have any other motion?
I would like to make a motion that since he has the questions in advance, that if Larry so chooses to go through and answer those, then give it to legal for approval, or he may do it on his own and not represent the board, or he may take Wendy, or he may take legal with him to do the interview on video.
No.
Multiple choice. It gives you an
Having a
option
meeting at a school.
due to travel concerns.
I think he should go and speak on
Logistically, I don't have time to do all that.
Yeah,
between
it's-
now and November the 5th.
Larry, the topics, I talked to them and they said the topics are all just determining what is a fictitious name and what is not.
Yeah.
And I'll withdraw my motion.
You withdraw, okay. We're back to square one.
I guess, do we need to do anything?
In my opinion, I thought that this would be fine for Mr. Elmore to go speak. I just wanted the board to approve. But if the board does not feel that that
For
is
them
appropriate,
speaking in a
that is
non-official capacity,
Right, yeah, we can approve.
yeah.
Can we approve
don't
that?
have to do that. I mean, in advance, because all of us may want.
Maybe you
I
can
agree
just
with that.
inform us that he's.
Hey, look, can we not just make a blanket motion that anytime a board member is asked to speak, that they just disclose that they're not operating in an official capacity and move on down the road, and just do this generically, and then we're covered.
That sounds.
Yeah, we can do that.
And that maybe legal standardize that statement so that we all use the same type of statement as had been requested earlier.
Can you give me something to read before I speak?
Yes.
I'll make my comment as a motion. If that's okay.
Second.
Would somebody restate that motion, because I did not hear it completely.
He's basically doing a blanket statement that the board member would essentially notify the board when they're speaking in a non-official capacity. Did I understand that right, Stephen?
Yes. Yes.
Just that we're to be informed when people are doing that.
No, I think what he said was that if a board member chooses to speak, that they would do so in an unofficial capacity.
Oh, I thought you said that, but okay, so we don't have to be notified.
And they would use disclaimatory language
Yes.
as provided by counsel
Standard.
to inform their audience.
Yeah, what I said was we pass a generic motion now that says anytime a board member speaks publicly, they give a disclaimer up front that legal can work up a standard response for us, and they give that prior to any speech, and then we're covered, and we don't have to deal with this anymore.
Hey, that's a motion now.
Second.
Who seconded that? Okay.
But are we saying that we have to get approval before we speak, or we just give the, okay, all right.
No.
Well, you'll read this before every class.
I will, sure will. It'll be in
Write
the
it on your
be in the
board.
syllabus.
Yeah, put it on the syllabus.
Hang it in the classroom.
This would be something, if we approve this, that would kind of go into our written policies, or?
Well, we can certainly add it to our policies, yes.
Will be the Elmore Amendment.
Yeah.
Well, actually, what I'd like to require is that
I know Kevin has to leave in just a minute or so here. Are we through discussing this?
Well,
or?
Stephen had one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
Nothing. I was just nothing. It was to be funny. I was going to say we have T-shirts printed up with that disclosure on it that we wear while we speak. So press along.
Y'all are being a little more conservative than legal typically is. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I think the T-shirts is a great idea.
Yeah. Tuxedo T-shirt.
Okay, I think we need a roll call vote.
Yes. Let's get a roll call vote.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
I'll vote aye on the general motion, not on my specific case.
Kevin Monroe. Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Okay, that covers our agenda. Is there anything else that needs to come before the board today? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
Second, anybody? All right.
Thank you.
We're adjourned. Fine.
See you guys later.
Thanks, Stephen.
Bye.
Out there and go lights out and knock
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go crazy.
You just need to go be Larry then.
That's right.
Blow them away.
I'm gonna be nervous.
Huh?
I'll be nervous.
You're on the cutting edge.
Not a fan of Mother May I
on
on
edge.
informal interactions.
I really wasn't aware of how much the ASCPA had reorganized that. How much everything's changing.
Yes, I shred all of the things left behind.
Getting little bits and pieces, and I think
Thank y'all.